Good morning, ladies of WCF. My name is Evangelist Patti Rose McGrew, and I am here with your Monday morning motivation. Thank you so much, Dr. Cersei, for this awesome opportunity to come and share with the women of God on this morning. You know, in January, many of us decided upon what our New Year's resolutions would be, those things that we wanted to work on, those goals and dreams and aspirations. And, you know, we may have resolved that we want to be all that God has called us to be in 2022. So as we move into the second month of this year, I hope that you will review those resolutions, that you will be introspective and retrospective about what you have done to move closer to those goals and closer to those dreams. My prayer today is that you have not allowed fear, doubt, or worry, or just anything encumber you from starting to move towards your goals. In Exodus 4 and 12 and 13, the scripture says that God told Moses, "Now go and do as I have told you. I will help you speak and I will tell you what to say." But Moses again pleaded, "Lord, please send somebody else." So does that sound like us sometimes, that God has given us so much to do, or God has given us a charge to do, or as we're working towards achieving our hopes, our dreams, our goals, all of these things, we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to come up with all of these excuses as to why we are not able to do what it is that's really in our hearts to do, or what it is that God has called us to do. And we start getting like Moses, and we start talking about what we consider all of our flaws, all of our handicaps, all of our disabilities, all of the things that are encumbering us from being all that God has called us to do. But here is the thing. God said to Moses, he says, I know all of those things about you. Because here's the reality. Jeremiah reminds us in Jeremiah 1 and 15 that God told us, "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. I knew you. I knew you before your mother ever met your father. And before that, I placed in you everything that you would need to be successful, everything that you would need to be all that I have called you to be, everything that you need to be who you desire to be." And so we allow conflicting emotions to cause us to just stop in our tracks and to paralyze us. And we start to see ourselves as inadequate. We start to see ourselves as unworthy. But God sees us in such a different way. He views us in a much different light. He sees the promises inside of us. He sees everything in us that he has put in us, those leadership capabilities. He knows those talents. He knows our strengths. He knows our weaknesses. And so we cannot be like Moses and focus on our weaknesses, but in what we consider to be our weaknesses or our disabilities. But we have got to focus on God, and we've got to focus on the fact that God understands the hardships that we have ahead of us. He understands that we may encounter some obstacles, but here is the thing. God also knew that inside of each one of us, in this earthen vessel, as 2 Corinthians 4 and 7 says, in this earthen vessel, he has given us a treasure. He has placed inside of us so much more than we think that we are capable of doing. Because here is the thing, in Daniel 11, verse 3, it says, "But the people that know God shall be strong and do great exploits." God uses ordinary people just like you and me to do great exploits. Women of God, God has called us for a time such as this. Stop shortchanging yourself. You know, I read a phrase the other day that said the greatest or the worst financial transaction that we could ever make, and that is to sell ourselves short. So women of God, stop selling yourself short. Stop always saying I'm not capable, because you are more than capable of doing what it is that you want to do. You are more than capable of carrying out the will of God for your life. You are more than capable of being all that God has called you to be. Women of God, he has placed so much in you. And so it is time for us. It is time for us to come forth, as Dr. Christie likes to say. Women of God, it is time for us to come forth and take our rightful places, because God sees us in our future and we look much better. We cannot see ourselves as ordinary. We've got to see ourselves extraordinary through the power of God, and that he's given us the ability to do great exploits. We cannot be like Gideon. Gideon saw himself, as the least in his father's house, but God saw him as a man of valor. So God sees you today as a woman who is clothed and robed in the strength of God and in the power of God and the might of God. He sees you victorious. He sees you strong. He sees that you are smart. He sees that you are intelligent. He sees that you are tenacious. He sees that you are courageous. So stop looking at your disabilities and start focusing on the one who is more than able, the one who is capable, the one who has formed you in your mother's womb and placed in you these hidden treasures and talents. And it is time for us to unearthing these treasures. It is time for us to move in the power of God. It is time for us to create and effectuate change in our communities, in our world, and in our home. And we don't have to wait on the next movement. The movement can begin with you today, because God has called you, woman of God, to be great. But here is the thing. First of all, you've got to know it. Just as Psalm says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. This does my soul know well. So you've got to know very well who you are. You've got to know very well whose you are. You've got to know very well that he is with you and that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. This does my soul know well. Then you've got to embrace it. You've got to wear it like a robe. You've got to embrace what God has for you and stop declaring and seeing yourself as unworthy. You don't need to be the next somebody, but just be the great person that God has intended for you to be. So you've got to wear everything that God has called for you to be. He has called us to be CEOs. He has called us to be COOs. He's called us to be deans and to be leaders. He's called us to greatness. He's called us to write the book. He's called us to move in the political circle. He has called us to greatness. So you've got to embrace it, and you've got to say, I am all that God has intended for me to be. I will be all that God has created for me to be. I will stop selling myself short. I will move forward, and I will persevere, and I will reach and obtain my goals. So you've got to embrace it, and then you've got to own it. You've got to be like those confident women that walk into a room and they don't ever say anything, but everybody stops and looks at them because they own who they are. And some of us are not owning who we are. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are the apple of God's eye. We've got to own the fact that we are a royal priesthood, that we are a chosen generation. We've got to own the fact that God would above all things for us to be prosperous and in good health, even as our souls prosper. So women of God, let God arise in you and your enemies be scattered. Those enemies of fear, doubt, those enemies of self-defeat, low self-esteem, but rise up today and let God be glorified in your life, because he has called us, women of God, to do extraordinary